counter offer for your clients. But when it comes to revoking offers for your clients, you're doing that all day long and twice on Sunday, all right? And that is a challengeable thing to do. Case up in Taos, a seller had submitted a counter offer to buyer number 1. Buyer number 2 comes in, and guess what? Buyer number 2's offer is much better than buyer number 1, right? And so the listing broker picks up the phone, calls buyer number 1's buyer broker and says, we revoke the offer. Immediately, buyer number 1 signs the offer, the counter offer that was sent over, and sends it back over. In the meantime, seller has signed buyer number 2's offer, and there's 2 contracts. And the argument from, of course, the seller side is, no, we revoked that first before we accepted that second offer. And the argument, the counter argument from the buyer number 1 was, no, your broker did that, and your broker is a transaction broker, not your agent, so they can't bind you with their words, and I received nothing from you, buyer, and we have a contract. Okay? We have not created this form before because we were concerned that you would think this was the only way to revoke an offer. If you didn't get this signed, you just, stood there like deers in the headlights and didn't know what to do, and we didn't want that to happen. That's part of what I talk about in my voice article, okay? This is the best case scenario, is you get this signed by your customer or client and you get it over to the other side, okay? But sometimes that's not possible. Sometimes they're not in a place to do an electronic signature or to sign it in person. So what do you do in that scenario? Second best scenario, you get them to send you something, like I talked about before, an email, a text, something from the party doing the revocation, and you get that over, you forward that over to the other side. So the source is very clear that it's them. Revocations don't have to be in writing. There's nothing in the law that says they have to be in writing, okay? So you get it from them and you send it over, because it's the party that's doing it is the important part, all right? Worst case scenario, you have to make a phone call and do what that broker did, okay? Because they're not in a position where they can send you anything, email you, text you, you're dealing with older people that don't even know what those things are, and you can't get the information, and you need to get that thing off the table. Pick up the phone, send an email yourself, get it off the table, and we'll have to deal with the rest of it later on, right? We'll have to make the arguments later on that you had the authority to do what you did, right? But at least you have a fighting chance. Don't do nothing because you can't get this form signed, or because you can't get an email or text from your client. But this is the last case scenario, is just making that phone call, okay? This is the first case scenario using the form. So it's a new form in our library. The random voice article, or the MR voice article I'm referencing, is actually one of the links. I sent it back out. I sent it out when we created this form. I sent it back out yesterday. We have a new vendor certification form for brokers or property managers. This form was intended to be just for property managers, but they use the term broker. So the Real Estate Commission has taken the position that it pertains to all brokers. So the thing what this says is that in the event that you are hiring vendors for your buyers or sellers, then you have to make sure that they are properly licensed and bonded and insured as required by New Mexico law for the job that they're doing. Does that mean that they all have to be licensed and insured and bonded for the job that they're doing? I mean, all be licensed and bonded or insured? No. You have to look at what they're doing and determine whether or not that's required based on what they're doing. If you guys are just making arrangements, you're just picking up the phone and trying to make the appointment for your buyer or seller, that doesn't constitute hiring. But if you guys are choosing these people and you guys are paying these people, you guys are hiring these people. And you better be sure that they have all the proper licensures and are bonded and things like that as required by law. That's true too. Everybody's kind of freaking out about this. You guys should have been doing it all along, right? Because in the event that you hire somebody, even if you refer somebody to your client or customer who doesn't have the proper licensure for the job that they need done, and it's done poorly, and your buyer or seller suffers damages as a result, who are they going after? They'll go after the vendor. They'll also go after you for negligent referral. Okay, so nobody should be on any of your lists that aren't properly licensed and insured if that's required for the job that they're doing. Okay, but there's a form now where we solicit information, because one of the big things is the handyman exception. There's a handyman exception. First of all, there's things that don't fall under handyman or contractor. So any of these things on Exhibit A, anybody can do. There's no licensure requirements for those. Okay, but there's also a handyman exception, which is on the bottom here of 9. So if they're not one of these things here, so they do require them to have a handyman license, then it tells you the kind of things that they can do and how much they can be paid to do it, because they can't make more than $7,200 a year as a handyman. That's not very much, is it?
So we had quite a discussion about that. So is that us paying them $7,200 a year, or
Total.
No, that's
All
everybody.
the-
Everybody and everybody's paying them. But you have no way of knowing what
Right,
everybody's
okay.
doing, and that's what this certification is doing. This form, the certification form, is asking them to certify to you, because the reality is the real
Okay.
estate commission can't come after you and say, oh, they made 500 from you and 800 from them and 9, so they were over 7,200. You're in violation, broker, right?
Right.
You have no idea what they're making with other people. So you are relying on their certification here to say, I fall under this exception. I'm not making more than $7,200 a year. That's what this form is for.
alright.
Yeah. In part, it also gives licensure and all that stuff too.
Did you say that we have to get this also if they hire?
No, no.
somebody? Only if we
If you hire,
facilitate.
exactly. Real estate commission only has jurisdiction over
Okay.
brokers, not
I was
over
just
buyers and
double
sellers,
checking. Or if
right?
we refer to.
Right. Well, not if you refer, no, if you're just referring, but I was talking about how from even before this form came around, if you are referring people, not, let's put this form aside, this regulation aside, if you guys are referring vendors to your people, and they should be licensed, insured, bonded as required by law for the job they're doing, right? If you're sending them over a handyman to do something that requires a contractor's license, so they don't have insurance, and they're not, they don't have their contractor's license, and that person does it wrong, and they suffer damages, they're coming after you, right? So you need to find out from your client, what is it exactly we're doing here? Okay, you want some names? Here's 3 names. I know they're all to be contractors. I know they're all having their insurance. I know of that, all of these things. And so to put them even on your list, you could use this form, right? Yeah, you could use this form just to get them on your list, right?
Just
So
have
that,
a file, so like if something, like all these,
Right.
I have 10 guys I
yeah,
do, and this is all their
exactly,
information.
exactly. And then just keep track of the expiration dates on their certificates and go back to them and get get new information. So I mean, it's a great way for you guys to figure out whether you want to put them on your list and to make sure that you've covered yourself in that respect. So so it serves multiple purposes. As far as the real estate commission is concerned, you only need it if you're hiring, but it can be used if you want to put them on your referral list. So it tells you about a permitted task and prohibited handyman tasks, because a lot of handymen are used. Okay, so let's talk about the backup contract form that was just released yesterday. Our current form is only good for one backup contract, okay? Not multiple backup contracts, but we're in a market right now where sometimes there are multiple backup contract situations. So we have revised this form to reflect that. What got released yesterday are these forms, along with videos that I put together explaining these forms in detail. So you can take a look at them. I think the longest one is like 7 minutes. So, I mean, you guys can look at them at your leisure. But you'll notice under 1, 1 and 2 are just identifying, I wonder if I have the correct one, because this looks different. But anyway, let's start with 1 here. There's the purchase agreement with another buyer. So you're identifying in 1, the contingency, a couple of things. You're identifying what the contingency is, and what is the contingency? The contingency is that there are other backup contracts in front of you, and the parties do not have to perform on this backup contract until and unless those other contracts in front of me terminate, right? And I move into primary position. That's the contingency we've created. Number A is that there's a prior purchase agreement, and that might be the only one you're using if there's only a prior purchase agreement. But if they have another backup contract behind that prior purchase agreement, then you're going to check box B too. So you're going to identify it. There's a primary and there's a backup. You might just be using A. You might never check B if it's your first backup contract, right? Number 2 is the notice provisions. So this is the date by which the seller has to tell the buyer you have moved into primary position. And if the seller doesn't tell the buyer that by this date, the buyer gets to walk away. This will terminate and the buyer gets to walk away. This is a very important date because buyers tend to think in backup contract situations that I can keep looking at properties, and if I see something else that I like better, I can just tell the seller that I'm terminating my backup contract and I can just go buy this other property instead, right? That's not the way this works. This is a contract, right? People are obligated under contracts. The seller is obligated to move that buyer up into first position. So this buyer has to be obligated in some way too, and they're obligated to stay in this contract until the date that you guys put in this paragraph. So if you have a buyer who absolutely loves the property, right? I mean, I just want this property. I will hang in there as long as I need to hang in there. Then you will put a date far into the future, right? Because they're in it for the long haul. But if you have a buyer who wants to keep looking at property and jump ship if they find something they like better, then you want to put a short date in here, okay? We'll be obligated under this for 4 days, and then I'm done. If I don't move into primary in 4 days, I'm moving on to another property, okay? So this is a very important date, and it's very important for you to